James. Stop. Stop the car right now.
Adriana screamed hysterically, her voice piercing through the rhythmic thumping of the rain against the roof of her luxury Maybach. Before the car could even come to a full halt on the wet pavement of Manhattan, Adriana had flung the door open and leaped out. Her expensive stilettos, worth thousands of dollars, sank instantly into the cold gray slush at the edge of Times Square.
She didn't care.
Her silk designer coat was soaked to the bone in seconds, but her eyes scanned the crowded sidewalks wildly, searching for the silhouette of the young newspaper boy who had just passed by. Clutched tightly in her hand was a small object that had fallen from the damp folds of the New York Post she had just bought, a faded, grimy red string bracelet with a star-shaped wooden bead. On the back of that bead was a tiny, hand-carved letter L. It was a carving she had made herself 10 years ago, just hours before her baby was snatched from a private hospital in Upper East Side, disappearing forever. Adriana stood frozen in the middle of the downpour, gasping for air, her chest tightening with a tidal wave of emotion she hadn't felt in a decade. For 10 years, she had lived in a magnificent penthouse overlooking Central Park that felt more like a tomb. As the CEO of a global shipping empire, Adriana had everything, except for the one thing that made her feel alive, her daughter Leora. Every night, she would clutch a set of empty baby clothes, inhaling the fading scent of the fabric, asking God where her child was. And now, the answer had fallen into her lap through a soggy newspaper. 3 minutes ago, Adriana's world had been flat and cold. She had been staring blankly out the window as the traffic snaked through the neon-lit streets of Midtown. Then a thin, ragged boy named Gabe knocked on her window. Gabe looked utterly destitute, his face was smudged with city soot, and his eyes held a painful kind of resilience. But what tore Adriana's heart out was the sight on Gabe's back. A tiny girl, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, tied to him with a tattered scarf and wrapped in a black trash bag to keep her dry. The child, Lily, looked deathly pale, her eyes glazed with fever, and her small body convulsed with violent shivers every time she coughed.
Gabe. Gabe. Where are you?
Adriana cried out hoarsely, her voice swallowed by the roar of the rain and the impatient blaring of yellow cab horns. She ran through the narrow alleys near Hell's Kitchen, past abandoned buildings and steam rising from the vents. The stench of wet asphalt and city grime stung her nose, but Adriana pushed forward, wading through puddles that reached her ankles. Her mind raced back to the red string bracelet in her hand. It was one of a pair she had specially prepared for her baby's birth. One she kept in her vault as a reminder of her grief, and the other she had slipped onto her daughter's tiny wrist moments after she was born. How was it possible that a bracelet meant for a New York billionaire's daughter had ended up with a barefoot boy selling papers in the rain? Adriana collapsed to her knees in front of a dark alleyway. Her tears finally broke, merging with the rain washing over her face. She felt like an utter failure as a mother. All this time, she had slept on Egyptian cotton sheets in a temperature-controlled room, while her daughter might have been shivering in a subway tunnel or under the Brooklyn Bridge, fighting for her life against pneumonia just to see tomorrow. Every time Lily coughed in Adriana's memory, it felt like a serrated blade twisting in her heart. She remembered Lily's gaze. Those round eyes, they were the exact same eyes she saw in her own reflection every morning. A soul-deep connection that defied medical logic suddenly screamed in her heart, "It's her. That's your lost child. James, call the investigators now. I don't care about the cost, get every private eye in the city to find those 2 kids. Search every shelter, every subway station, and every alley from the Bronx to Brooklyn." Adriana barked instructions over the phone, her voice trembling but filled with undeniable authority. That night, Adriana returned to her sprawling, empty penthouse. She took out her secret jewelry box and retrieved the matching red string bracelet. She laid her clean, pristine bracelet next to the grimy one she had found today. The star-shaped wooden beads touched. They were a perfect match. The old wound she thought had scarred over was ripped wide open, bleeding with a pain more searing than ever before. She pictured Lily wrapped in a trash bag. She pictured Gabe, faithfully carrying his sister through the storm just to find a scrap of food. A fierce, uncontrollable rage bubbled up inside her. Rage at the kidnappers who stole her baby, rage at a fate so cruel, and rage at herself for being too late. Adriana didn't sleep for a single second. She sat at her desk, staring at a digital map of New York marked with red pins on every low-income housing project and homeless camp. She made a silent vow: when the sun rose tomorrow, she would not stop until Lily was in her arms. She would tear down every skyscraper in this city if she had to, just to bring her soul back home. Her journey had only just begun, and this time, Adriana would not let that red thread break again. The sun had not yet risen over the Manhattan skyline when Adriana stepped out of her penthouse, but she was already armed with a mission. She had traded her silk blazer for a heavy dark parka and her heels for sturdy boots. She didn't look like a CEO anymore, she looked like a woman on the warpath. Her lead investigator had traced a sighting of a newspaper boy with a child on his back, near the industrial outskirts of Dumbo, right under the massive rusting iron pillars of the Manhattan Bridge. The rain had turned into a bone-chilling mist that clung to the city like a shroud. As Adriana's car pulled into the desolate area, the smell of damp concrete and old metal filled the air. This was a part of New York her world usually ignored, a place where the shadows were long and the forgotten people of the city sought refuge. "Wait here, James," Adriana commanded as she stepped out into the fog.
Ma'am, it's not safe.
"Let me come with you," James pleaded, looking at the dark tents and makeshift shacks clustered under the bridge.
No.
"I need to do this as a mother, not a boss. If they see a bodyguard, they'll run.
I need them to see me."
Adriana began to walk, her heart hammering against her ribs. She showed a photo, not of Lily, but a sketch of Gabe, to a few people huddled around a flickering fire in a metal drum. Most ignored her, but one elderly man with a cough pointed a shaky finger toward a narrow gap between two shipping containers near the river's edge.
"The kid?"
"Yeah, he's back there. But the little one, she's not doing so good, lady. The city's cold is a silent killer," the man wheezed. Adriana's blood ran cold. She ran toward the containers, her boots splashing through icy puddles. There, tucked away from the wind, she found a small makeshift shelter made of discarded plywood and blue tarps. Inside, by the dim light of a single flickering candle, she saw him. Gabe was kneeling on the freezing ground. He was soaking wet, his shirt thin and torn, but he wasn't shivering. He was too busy rubbing Lily's tiny blue-tinged feet. Lily was lying on a pile of damp cardboard, wrapped in the same black trash bag and a thin, moth-eaten blanket. Her breathing was shallow and ragged, a terrifying whistling sound in her chest that signaled advanced pneumonia.
"Gabe?"
Adriana whispered, her voice cracking. The boy spun around, his eyes wide with animal-like terror. He immediately shielded Lily with his own body, clutching a rusted pocket knife in his trembling hand.
"Stay back.
"We didn't steal anything. I sold all the papers, I have the money right here." "I'm not here for the money, Gabe," Adriana said, slowly dropping to her knees in the dirt to show she wasn't a threat. She held out the red string bracelet.
"I'm here because of this. And I'm here because of her."
Gabe's gaze flickered to the bracelet, then back to Adriana's tear-streaked face.
The knife lowered slightly.
"I found her," he whispered, his voice breaking.
5 years ago.
Someone left her in a dumpster behind a diner in Queens. She was just a baby. She was crying so hard.
I couldn't leave her.
I've been her big brother ever since." Adriana felt a sob catch in her throat. While she was searching the world with private jets and millions of dollars, her daughter had been kept alive by a homeless boy who had nothing but a brave heart.
Gabe had been the hero she couldn't be. "She's my daughter, Gabe. Her name is Leora."
"And you saved her life," Adriana sobbed, reaching out. Lily let out a weak, wet cough, her small hand reaching out into the air as if searching for something to hold. Adriana lunged forward, gently scooping the small, feverish body into her arms. The heat radiating from the child was alarming.
"She's burning up, Gabe. We have to go now."
Just as Adriana turned to carry Lily to the car, a group of dark figures emerged from the shadows of the bridge. These weren't the homeless residents. These were the tunnel rats, a local gang that preyed on the weak in the area. They had seen Adriana's expensive parka and knew she didn't belong here.
Look at this, the leader sneered, blocking the exit. A rich lady lost in the woods. Why don't you leave the kids and give us that fancy watch, and maybe we'll let you walk out of here. Gabe stood up, despite his small stature, placing himself between the thugs and Adriana. Leave them alone, he screamed. Adriana gripped Lily tighter to her chest, the red thread on her wrist glowing faintly in the candlelight. She looked at the men with eyes that held the ferocity of a lioness. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she hissed. I've spent 10 years in hell looking for my soul. If you think you're stopping me from taking her home, you're going to find out exactly what a mother is capable of. The atmosphere under the Manhattan Bridge turned lethal in a heartbeat. The leader of the tunnel rats took a step forward, his eyes locked on the diamond ring on Adriana's finger. But Adriana didn't flinch. She adjusted her grip on Lily, whose breathing was now a terrifying wet rattle against her chest. Gabe, get behind me, Adriana commanded. As the thugs closed in, the roar of a powerful engine echoed through the steel pillars. Headlights as bright as stadium lights cut through the fog, blinding the attackers. It was James. He hadn't stayed in the car. He had driven the massive Maybach straight onto the dirt path, tires churning through the mud. James stepped out, not as a polite chauffeur, but as the former Special Forces veteran he truly was. He didn't say a word, he just stood there, a wall of muscle and suppressed violence. The thugs, realizing they were outmatched by both a car and a man who looked like he could break them in half, retreated into the shadows of the bridge. The hospital, James. Now. Adriana screamed. They scrambled into the car. Adriana sat in the back, cradling Lily's shivering body, while Gabe sat huddled in the corner of the leather seat, staring in awe at the luxury he had never seen in his life. But he wasn't looking at the car, he was looking at Lily. Is she going to die? Gabe whispered, his voice small and broken. I tried to keep her warm. I gave her all my food. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Adriana reached out her free hand and pulled the ragged boy toward her. No, Gabe. You didn't fail her. You are the reason she's still breathing. You're a hero. The Maybach tore through the streets of Brooklyn, crossing the bridge back into Manhattan with its hazard lights flashing. Adriana pulled out her phone and made one call. Dr. Sterling? I'm arriving at Presbyterian in 5 minutes. I have a pediatric emergency. Possible stage 3 pneumonia and severe malnutrition. Have a team waiting at the bay. No questions asked, just save her. When they arrived, the emergency room doors flew open. Nurses and doctors swarmed the car. As Lily was whisked away on a gurney, Gabe tried to run after her, but a security guard held him back. Wait. That's my sister. Gabe yelled, his eyes filling with tears. It's okay, Gabe. I've got you, Adriana said, wrapping her expensive parka around his thin shoulders. They're going to help her. For the next 6 hours, Adriana and Gabe sat in the private waiting lounge. It was a surreal sight, the most powerful woman in New York logistics, covered in mud and rain, sitting next to a homeless boy who smelled of the streets. Adriana watched as Gabe eventually fell asleep from pure exhaustion, his head resting on a velvet pillow. Even in his sleep, his hand was tucked into his pocket, clutching the newspaper coins he had earned that day. Just as the sun began to peek over the East River, Dr. Sterling walked in, pulling off his surgical mask. Adriana stood up so fast she almost fell. She's stable, Adriana, the doctor said with a tired smile. It was close. Another hour in that cold and her lungs would have given up. But she's a fighter. She's sleeping now. Adriana's knees finally buckled, and she fell back into the chair, sobbing with relief. She looked at the red string bracelet on her wrist. The thread had been frayed, stretched across 10 years of pain and miles of city streets, but it hadn't broken. She walked into the recovery room. Lily looked so tiny in the large hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and 4 drips. Adriana sat beside her and gently took her small hand. Then she looked at Gabe, who was standing at the doorway, hesitant to enter the pristine white room. Come here, Gabe, Adriana whispered. The boy walked over, looking at Lily's peaceful face. "She looks like a princess now," he whispered. "She is a princess," Adriana replied. "And from this day on, so are you. You saved my daughter, Gabe. You didn't just find her, you protected her soul. This hospital bed isn't just for her. There's a room next door for you, with a warm bed and the best doctors. We're going home, Gabe. All of us." But as Adriana looked at Lily's sleeping face, a dark thought crossed her mind. Lily hadn't ended up in a dumpster by accident. Someone had taken her. Someone had tried to erase her. And as the sun rose over New York City, Adriana realized that finding her daughter was only the beginning. Now she was going to find the people who took her, and she was going to make them regret the day they ever touched a child of the House of Sterling. A week had passed. Lily was breathing on her own, her cheeks finally regaining a hint of pink. Gabe, now clean and dressed in fine clothes, refused to leave her side. He sat by her bed, reading her stories from books he used to only see through bookstore windows. But while the children healed, Adriana was in a cold fury. She sat in her mahogany-paneled office at the top of the Sterling Tower, looking at a file James had just placed on her desk. "I pulled the old security footage from the hospital 10 years ago, Adriana," James said, his voice grim. "The original files were lost in a server crash, but I found an offline backup in the basement of the security firm we used to use." Adriana leaned forward. "And the person who took Leora wasn't a stranger. She knew the codes to the private wing. She knew exactly when the nurses shifted." James pressed play on his laptop. The grainy black and white footage showed a woman in a nurse's uniform, her face partially hidden by a surgical mask. But Adriana's heart stopped when she saw the woman's hand. On her right wrist was a very distinct tattoo of a blue butterfly. Adriana gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sarah. Your sister." James whispered, stunned. "Sarah was there that night. She told me she was in the waiting room. She was the one who comforted me when the alarm went off." Adriana stood up, knocking her chair over. "Why? Why would my own sister throw my baby into a dumpster?" "Money, Adriana," James replied. "Think back. Your father's will stated that the bulk of the Sterling estate would go to you, provided you had an heir to carry on the name. If Leora disappeared, Sarah was next in line." The betrayal felt worse than the 10 years of silence. Adriana looked out the window at the New York skyline. Her own blood had poisoned her life. Sarah had watched Adriana cry for a decade, had attended every memorial service for the lost baby, and had even suggested Adriana move on, all while knowing she had left Leora to die in the trash. "Where is she now?" Adriana asked, her voice as cold as ice. "She's at her estate in the Hamptons. She's throwing a charity gala tonight." "For the protection of children," James added with a sick sense of irony. Adriana tightened her grip on the red string bracelet. "Get the car, James. And get my finest dress. I'm going to a party." "Do you want me to call the police?" "Not yet," Adriana said, a dark smile touching her lips. "I want to see the look on her face when the dead come back to haunt her. I want her to feel the cold and the mud before she ever sees a jail cell." Adriana walked out of the office, her footsteps echoing with purpose. The hunt was over, but the war had just begun. Tonight, the red thread was going to tighten around Sarah's neck. The Hamptons estate was glowing with golden lights, filled with New York's elite. Diamond necklaces sparkled under crystal chandeliers, and expensive champagne flowed like water. At the center of it all was Sarah, dressed in a white gown, smiling as she accepted praise for her charity work. But the atmosphere shifted the moment the grand doors swung open. Adriana stepped into the ballroom. She wasn't wearing white, she was dressed in a gown as black as night, her eyes cold and sharp. Behind her, James walked with a grim expression, carrying a small electronic tablet. Sarah's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered. "Adriana, you're late to my gala. But I'm so glad you could make it. We were just talking about—" "We're not here to talk, Sarah,"
Adriana interrupted, her voice echoing across the silent room. The guests began to whisper. Adriana walked straight to the podium, brushing past her sister. She looked at the crowd, the billionaires, the influencers, the city officials. Tonight, we are here to talk about children, Adriana said into the microphone. About how they are vulnerable. About how those we trust can be the monsters in the dark. Adriana, what are you doing? You're making a scene, Sarah hissed, trying to grab Adriana's arm. Adriana pulled away and looked at Sarah's right wrist. The blue butterfly tattoo was visible. Adriana's heart burned with a mix of hatred and grief. James, show them. With a click, the massive projector screens meant for charity photos changed. Instead of images of orphans, the grainy black and white hospital footage from 10 years ago began to play. The room went dead silent. They watched the woman in the nurse's uniform. They watched the butterfly tattoo on her wrist, as she picked up a crying newborn and walked out into the night. Sarah's face went bone white. That's not me. That's a deep fake. Adriana, stop this madness. I found the bracelet, Sarah, Adriana whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch it. She held up the grimy red string. I found the girl you threw in a dumpster in Queens. She didn't die. A boy with more heart than you'll ever have kept her alive for 10 years. The guests gasped. Phones were pulled out, recording every second. The Queen of Charity was being unmasked as a child kidnapper in her own home. You did it for the inheritance, Adriana continued, stepping closer until she was inches from Sarah's face. You watched me break every day for a decade. You hugged me at Leora's empty funeral while you knew she was shivering under a bridge. You aren't my sister. You're a ghost. You can't prove anything. Sarah screamed, her voice cracking. I don't need to, Adriana said calmly. The police are at the front gate. And James? He found the bank records of the anonymous payments you made to the hospital security guard 10 years ago. It's over. As the sirens blared outside, Adriana leaned in and whispered into Sarah's ear, Lily is safe. She's in my house. And Gabe, the boy who saved her? He's going to have everything you ever wanted. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cold cell, thinking about the dumpster you left my daughter in. As the police led a screaming Sarah away in handcuffs, the elite of New York watched in stunned silence. Adriana didn't stay to celebrate. She turned and walked out, the black silk of her dress snapping in the wind. She got into the car, where Gabe was waiting in the back seat. He looked at her, worried. Is it done? Adriana took a deep breath, the weight of 10 years finally lifting off her shoulders. She took Gabe's hand and smiled through her tears. Yes, Gabe. It's done. Let's go home to Lily. The red thread had finally led them all back to where they belonged. The scars were still there, but the air in New York finally felt clean.